well, let's say evolution is true. Wouldn't you want to ban it? Because then when you come to questions of like music, it turns out we just evolved this thing. It's arbitrary. We just happen to like it.
No,
and so then we view the
no.
entire world as this accident of history in which we find ourselves in. All this stuff's just kind of arbitrary. Wouldn't it be better if they just banned it anyway? I don't know. I mean,
So
like,
that is,
it seems to me that like I remember arguing with the professor once when I was in college, and he assumed that there's like, even as a sort of, I guess I don't think he was an atheist, but he kind of assumed that truth and goodness kind of went along with themselves, like that somehow the truth is going to actually be good for people. But I wonder in this case if it is true that there's actually reasons to ban it for that very reason. I mean, do you think that like there's a link between truth and goodness?
I think that,
or could it be that truth actually leads to what's bad, that it actually harms us?
I think this is, I would say this is my most fundamental religion. I don't believe that Jesus literally rose from the dead, or at least not yet. I have a long journey to go. But the most fundamental faith claim that I have is that the most moral thing you can do as a human being is say what you honestly believe to be true as best as you can and trust that the outcome is the best thing. And there's all kinds of complexity to that, because you can be, you can say things that are propositionally true that get people to believe one thing that is a falsehood. Like the extreme example of this is I can say, well, I know a 40-year-old man who slept with a 13-year-old girl. It's like, well, the obvious implications are, well, this person's a PDF file. But I forgot to mention that 40-year-old man, he was 13 at the time, and this was 30 years ago when they were both 13, or they were both in high school or whatever, and it was his college girlfriend or something like that, right? Or high school girlfriend. So like you can say things that are propositionally true that purposely lead to a falsehood. So it's not just propositional truth per se. But I do think like fundamentally that, yeah, truth and goodness, I don't think something can be good if it contains any level of falsity or deception or anything like that.
Okay. I don't know. I just like, we don't have to dwell on this, but no, I mean, this is just something I've thought right now. I've been tied it to evolution. I've thought of this before, but I don't know if our behaviors were fit for survival when we're hunter gatherers or some kind of pre-civilizational state. Because as I understand, like the state did not exist until very recently in evolutionary theory, and so for most of history, man lived under conditions in which there was not a state or hunter-gatherer villages, whatever. I mean, so if our evolutionary process made us fit for that environment, and yet we live in a completely different environment now, it would seem that like discovering these things would in itself, and then kind of acknowledging the truth of them would actually affect the good that can come from this society in our current conditions. Like we're, does that make sense? So I'm just thinking through right now, but I don't know. It would say, in a way, it could justify the suppression of truth in the interest of some good that we recognize in society.
Well, I would say the problem with that is the truth will make itself known explicitly or implicitly. So let's say it is true that we are wired to live in which I think it is, like our brain is wired for, we can only maintain like 150 relationships at a time because of our tribal past or whatever, something like that. Dunbar's number, I think it is. Let's say that was true and we failed and we never acknowledged it. Well, then we would constantly be trying to build societies and break. It's like if there's an error in your code, like let's say you're developing software, and at the very base, at the beginning of your code, there's, you put the wrong character in. You're going to spend your whole life trying to fix the code somewhere else where the problem isn't. The problem isn't actually there. The problem is deeper in the code. And I would say, anytime if you avoid the truth, then you will inevitably avoid the true cause of whatever problem you're trying to solve. It's sort of, I think that's how I would put it, if that makes sense.
Okay. The data thing threw me off because I don't know anything about that.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, so I don't want to do like and affirm the consequence here. But like, do you think that something that's false can produce something that is good? So this is the point I'm getting
It's
at.
a great question.
So because like when you say you're cultural Christian, that means you like this sort of cult Christian things that were developed. I guess by that you mean that Christianity was an essential element of creating that culture that you like. It wasn't just a supporter or catalyst. It was like an essential element, which means that you look at the architecture and the music, and you say the cultural customs that were created from it, which you would affirm as good. But then as like a sort of atheist, I guess you'd say that Christianity is false. So wouldn't that lead to saying that what is false can lead to what is good? Or would you say in reverse, if like whatever produces good is actually true, which would then be an argument for Christianity, right?
So
then if you look at like a lot of people say the 20th century is a sort of godless age, that's kind of simplistic. But then you see the sort of works that arose from conditions of godlessness, and you can see that all around us. Not just brutalism, but the sort of even like the sort of music. I don't know music well enough. I've heard it, but I don't know the names. But a lot of like the more modern classical, music. So anyway, I mean, so what do you think about that? Like, how does that?
Go ahead.
No,
you were saying, and so again, I don't know for your audience, maybe who's not familiar with Jordan Peterson. He is hated by atheists, right? There are all kinds of like Richard Dawkins type crew who really, they had a recent conversation, but there's a lot of atheists who hate Jordan Peterson, precisely because of this issue where he's squirrely around what exactly is truth. So can something be literally this idea of metaphorical truth? So like, for example, if I treat all guns as if they're loaded, even though that might not actually be true, believing that every gun I come across is loaded is going to lead to good outcomes, like evolutionarily. I mean, guns are not involved in evolution, but you could see how believing something that isn't necessarily or literally true can produce a positive outcome, right? Because you'll never shoot yourself if you believe every gun that you have is loaded and don't treat it foolishly. So that would be called a metaphorical truth. And this is what Peterson gets all kinds of hate for in terms of like, well, the Bible it's not literally true, but it's metaphorically true. When he's asked about if he believes in God, he doesn't say, I believe in God. He says, I act as if I believe in God. And it's this squirrely stuff, which I'm sympathetic to because I've watched, plenty of his stuff and I get where he's coming from. And I sort of have the same intuitions. But the point you raise is exactly the point. While a ton of atheists hate Jordan Peterson, is like, you say focus on truth, and yet here's the Bible, which you don't even necessarily believe. Although he has said he seems to think that Jesus did literally rise from the dead. So I'm not sure I don't know what to believe at this point. But yeah, it's a question of what is truth.
Jordan Peterson knows his audience.
True. Listen,
I won't say it outright, but one might think that. I don't know. I followed him a little while when he was crying and speaking to young guys, but I kind of stopped recently.
Well, that's.
I mean, he was a sensation for a while, very interesting and very effective, and then he wore funny suits, and I just stopped.
Yeah, I believe he is genuine. I certainly believe he is genuine in his convictions, and I think his flaws are the result of a number of issues. Him associating with the Daily Wire too much is probably the most recent one, aside from his other like mental health issues and stuff like that.